Warning, if you have not read this book, go and get it. Then read it. It's great. Really, it is. But for now, the following video will ruin the funniest parts of the book for you. You're welcome. Not long after I moved with my family to a small town in New Hampshire, I happened upon a path that vanished into a wood on the edge of town. A sign announced that this was no ordinary footpath, but the celebrated Appalachian Trail, running more than 2,100 miles along America's eastern seaboard through the serene and beckoning Appalachian Mountains. The AT is the granddaddy of long hikes. From Georgia to Maine, it wanders across 14 states through plump, comely hills whose very names, Blue Ridge, Smokies, Cumberlands, Catskills, Green Mountains, and White Mountains, seem an invitation to amble. The pure idea of setting off from home and walking 1,800 miles through Georgia, or turn the other way and clamber over the rough and stony White Mountains to the fabled brow of Mount Katahdin, floating in a forest 450 miles to the north in a wilderness few have seen. A little voice in my head said, "Sounds neat, let's do it." At Christmas, I put notes on lots of cards inviting people to come with me on the trail, if only part of the way. Nobody responded, of course. Then one day in late February, with departure nigh, I got a call. It was from an old school friend named Stephen Katz. Katz and I had grown up together in Iowa, but I had pretty well lost touch with him. Those of you, the 6 of you, who have read neither Here nor There, will recall Katz as my traveling companion around Europe in that tale of youthful adventure. In the 25 years since, I had run into him 3 or 4 times on visits home, but hadn't seen him otherwise. We had remained friends in kind of a theoretical sense, but our paths had diverged wildly. Hey, I've been hesitating to call, but this Appalachian Trail deal, do you think I could, maybe come with you? You want to come with me?
If it's a problem, I understand.
No, you're very welcome. You're extremely welcome.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, great. I thought you might not want me long.
Why the heck not?
Because, I still owe you $600 from Europe.
Hey, geez, certainly not, man. You owe me $600?
I still intend to pay you back.
Hey, man, it's not a problem. Hey, just come along hiking with me. You sure you're up for this, man?
Absolutely.
What kind of shape are you?
Real good. I walk every day, everywhere.
Really?
Well, they repossessed my car, you see.
We talked about this and that, his mother, my mother, life in general. I told him what little I knew about the trail and the wilderness of life that awaited us. We settled that we would fly to New Hampshire the next Wednesday, then spend 2 days making preparations, and then we'd hit the trail. For the first time in months, I felt positively positive about this enterprise. Katz seemed remarkably upbeat, too, for someone who didn't have to do this at all. Somehow we ended on this note. Hey, so, how are you with bears?
Hey, they haven't got to me yet.
In preparation, I headed to my nearest sports equipment store and decided what I needed for my trip across the East Coast. It took the entire afternoon to go through the stock. This thing has a 70 denier high-density abrasion-resistant fly with a ripstop weave, but the seams are lap-felled rather than bias-taped, and the vestibule is a little cramped. Like that means anything to me. After taking home all of the equipment the kind employee recommended would be best for this trip, I carried it down to my room in several trips. There was such a lot, nearly all of it technologically unfamiliar to me, which made it both exciting and daunting, but mostly daunting. I unfurled the self-inflating sleeping pad and pushed it inside and followed that with my fluffy new sleeping bag. Then I crawled in and lay there for quite a long time, trying out for size the expensive, confined, strangely new-smelling, entirely novel space that was soon to be my home away from home. I tried to imagine myself laying not in a room beside the reassuring, cozily domesticated roar of the furnace, but rather outside in a high mountain pass, listening to the wind and tree noise and the lonely howl of dog-like creatures. But I couldn't really. After a full day of hiking on the trail, I stopped for about the 7th time to allow Kat some time to catch up. I waited for him for 3/4 of an hour, then went looking for him. The light was fading and the air was taking on an evening chill. I walked and walked down the hill and through the endless groves of trees, back over ground that I had gratefully put behind me forever. Or so I thought. Several times I called his name and listened, but there was nothing. I walked on, over fallen trees I had struggled over hours before, down slopes I could now only dimly recall. My grandmother could have gotten this far, I kept thinking. Finally I rounded a bend, and there he was, stumbling towards me, wild-haired and one-gloved, and nearer hysteria than I have ever seen a grown person. It was hard to get the full story out of him in a coherent flow, because he was so furious, but I gathered he had thrown many items from his pack over a cliff in a temper. None of the things that had been dangling from the outside were there any longer.
Steven, you awake?
Yeah.
What was that?
How the heck should I know?
It sounded big.
Everything sounds big in the woods.
This was true. Once a skunk had come plodding through our camp, and it sounded like a stegosaurus.
Steven, did you pack a knife?
No.
Anything sharp at all?
Nail clippers.
Anything a little more vicious? There's something definitely out there.
Probably just a skunk.
Then it's one big skunk. Its eyes are 3 feet off the
Hear that?
ground. It didn't move.
Probably a buck. They're not so timid. Try shouting at it.
Hey, you there! Scat! You shout.
Oh, you brute. Go away, do. Please withdraw at once, you horrid creature.
Screw you.
What are you doing?
Moving my tent closer to yours.
Oh, good plan. That'll really confuse you. What are you doing, Bryson?
How can you be so calm?
What do you want me to do? You're hysterical enough for both of us.
I think I have the right to be trifle alarmed. Pardon me. I'm in the middle of nowhere with a bear staring at me with a guy who has a pair of nail clippers to defend himself with. What are you gonna do if it comes to you, huh? You gonna give it a pedicure?
I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
Cross that bridge? We're on that bridge, you moron! That bear smells Snickers and noodles and... Oh, crap.
What?
Oh, crap.
What?
There's two of them.
Well, I'm going to sleep.
Go to sleep. You can't go back to sleep.
Sure I can. I've done it lots of times.
Steven, you cannot go back to sleep.
I sat on my knees for ages, facing the front of the tent, listening keenly, gripping a stick like a club, ready to beat back an attack. The bears, animals, whatever they were, stayed there for perhaps 20 minutes more, then quietly departed the way they had come. It was a joyous moment, but I knew from my reading that they would be likely to return. I listened and listened, but the forest returned to silence and stayed there. Eventually, I loosened my grip on the stick and went back to bed. I lay there for a long time, staring at total blackness, and knew that never again would I sleep in the woods with a light heart. And then, irresistibly and by degrees, I fell asleep. I still quite often go for walks on the trail near my home, especially if I'm stuck on something I'm working on. Most of the time I'm sunk in thought, but at some point on each walk there comes a moment when I look up and notice, with a kind of first-time astonishment, the amazing complex delicacy of the woods, the casual ease with which elemental things come together to form a composition that is, whatever the season, wherever I put my besotted gaze, perfect. Not just very fine or splendid, but perfect, unimprovable. You don't have to walk miles up mountains to achieve this. You don't have to plod through blizzards, slip sputtering in mud, wade chest-deep through water, hike day after day to the edge of your limits, but believe me, it helps. The Appalachian Trail helped me understand now, in a way that I never did before, the colossal scale of the world. I found patience and fortitude that I didn't know I had. I discovered an America that millions of people scarcely know exists. I made a friend. I came home. We didn't walk 2,200 miles, it's true. But here's the thing. We tried. So Katz was right after all, and I don't care what anybody else says. We hiked the Appalachian Trail.